But back to the whole Mediterranean diet, there's lots of evidence, and this is evidence that comes out of some great studies, the North Manhattan Aging Project and the Whitecaps data, suggesting that when you adhere to the Mediterranean diet, you do reduce the risk of cognitive decline, risk of progression from mild cognitive impairment to dementia, et cetera. This is Nick Scarmeas' work out of Columbia, fabulous neurologist, epidemiologist.
So you're saying that the study showed that you can reduce your risk of dementia.
Consuming.
And
that's correct. And the interesting thing about that,
everyone needs to be doing this.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about that is that people say, well, the Mediterranean diet is an epiphenomenon of living in the Mediterranean. That is really has nothing to do with your diet. It's you happen to live in the Mediterranean. Mm-hmm. No, because that study was done in New York City where 2,200 people adhered to the Mediterranean diet and it worked great.
They're not in the Mediterranean.
They're not in the Mediterranean. And so we've had other luminaries like Martha Claire Morris and the Chicago Healthy Aging Project show that when they looked at people who adhered to very good diets with high amounts of legumes and vegetables, they had way lower risk of developing dementia.
That's
so
amazing.
The data is pretty consistent around this.
Okay. And what about, I'm sure some of our viewers may have heard of this dietary pattern, but are you familiar, I'm sure you are, with the MIND diet?
Yeah, that's actually
and how
Martha
that
Claire
compares.
Morris.
Yes, that's
It's a hybrid of the Mediterranean diet, and it kind of is vegetable forward, but it kind of incorporates some of the elements of the Mediterranean diet. And she's a big proponent. I think a lot of us would agree with that. The interesting thing now is we're starting to try to apply these in clinical trials. Mm-hmm. But doing a diet for a clinical trial is quite hard.
Right.
Because people don't like sticking to diets. So
or they last for 17 days
they last
after
for 17
New Year's,
days.
like you were saying earlier.
So what we can say is that the epi data is very strong, the science is very strong, but the trial evidence is not as good as it could be.
Okay. And so you mentioned having a brain healthy diet would include legumes, vegetables, fish.
Yeah, less saturated fat. So the one thing I have to say to your audience is that we need to reduce the amount of saturated fat in our diet.
Okay. Can you give some examples of just for people
burgers and fries.
Okay.
Good example of that. It's so funny talking about burgers and fries. I started eating the Impossible Burger because I was so excited.
I haven't tried that yet.
So excited about the Impossible Burger. It turns out has more saturated fat than a regular beef burger.
Are you serious?
I was stunned when I learned this.
That's wild.
I was really bummed out, actually.
Oh my gosh. It had so much promise.
It had so much promise. So it is not, but saturated fat is something you can show. And people kind of struggle with this. I live in Las Vegas. There's a steak house on every corner in this town, right? And meat is a big business in this town. Mm-hmm. But the fact is that they've studied this very carefully. This is one of those kind of situations that they actually did transgenic mice, which are mice genetically engineered to get Alzheimer's disease. And they gave these mice high-fat, high-saturated fat diets, and they could show that they accumulated a lot of Alzheimer changes in their brain compared to mice that got the control diet.
Oh my gosh.
And the science is really solid around that.
Right.
So what I say to the audience, of course, is that we want to replace saturated fat with mono and polyunsaturated fat. So I'm not saying remove that fat from your diet, just don't eat the butter, the lard.
So more avocados or
avocado
nuts.
Would be a polysaturated fat. Nuts would be polyunsaturated fat. Olive oil would be the monounsaturated fat. So I don't eat. I had, for the first time in a year, I had butter the other night at a French restaurant.
That's probably the best place to have it if you're going to have it.
I have not had butter in a year.
Wow.
And it was really delicious. but
then maybe you enjoy it more.
I enjoyed it.
You have just a little.
But you have to find ways to just commit yourself to taking these things out of your diet.
And it's probably all those little decisions every day on a daily basis that make a big difference for our long-term health.
It's so the little decisions involve going to the supermarket. Okay. Mm-hmm. The little decisions are saying that you're going to commit a certain amount of your day to exercising, a certain or commit to meditating or stress reduction. Mm-hmm. it's 2020. I started meditating consistently, meaning more than once a month in this year. That was my New Year's resolution.
That's how is it? Yeah. How is it going so far?
I am doing more than once a month.
That's great. That's probably better than a lot of people.
Yeah. So but it takes a commitment. I'll do it later. I got another thing. I got to do. So I remember very clearly, I gave a talk in Park City, Utah last August. And this is a very, very well-to-do, affluent community. And one of the people said, I'm just too busy to do all the things you talk about. And I've heard that comment before. And it was my wife who said something that just stuck in my brain a couple of years ago. He said, you need to attach economic value to you as a person. If you're not around, look at all the things that are lost.
Right.
Okay. Whether you're not around emotionally, intellectually, physically, you're dead, you're demented. There is an actual economic value to doing these things. So keeping you well is in your health and your financial interest and your long-term interests.
Right.
And so making a commitment in doing this is what we talk about because it's good for you in general, makes you feel better, but it's good for you in the long run.